Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Texas SignalCast. I'm your host, Joe Desotel, and I'm here with my co-host, Jessica Montelia-Coggins. Hello, Jessica.
Hey, Joe.
And today we are sort of at the heels of the new special session that just kicked off this morning. They gabbled in, they gabbled out, and we got a little bit of news, I think. So we're finally starting to see how this thing is going to start to shape up. It looks like tomorrow they're going to be hearing testimony on abortion bills, right? Right out of
Yeah,
the
in
gate.
a Senate committee hearing. Yes. So very short notice. I believe this special session only requires 24 hours, and they are fully utilizing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the list is long. We've talked about it. I think there are 11 total items on that list, and it's everything from bail reform to quote unquote election integrity, which we know is the redux of the SB 7 voter suppression bill. There's stuff on there about censoring conservatives on social media. There's things about them wanting to state censor teachers who teach history, anti-trans youth and sports bills. There's all kinds of things. But the first thing, as we talk about with the legislature, the only bill that they're ever required to pass during a legislative session is the budget. And so there's a budget item that's actually in this. It's HB 1. It's the Article 10 funding that the governor vetoed, that essentially includes all of the staff pay. So everybody who works at the state legislature, and including custodians and people who have absolutely nothing to do with policymaking, there happen to be in this part of the budget. The people who are not in this part of the budget are the legislators themselves, whose salaries are actually constitutional and therefore cannot be vetoed by the governor. So essentially, there's about 2,000 something people whose paychecks are being held at ransom, so that the governor can get these other 10 agenda items passed. So that's kind of where we are, right? And yesterday, another colleague of ours at the Signal, David Leffler, we talked about this a little bit in depth with a staffer, a chief of staff. Her name is Stephanie Chiarello. She's the chief of staff for Bobby Guerra. And she kind of gave us a staff perspective on, how they feel about it, what, she's talking to her other colleagues about, including other Republican staffers. And they seem to think that this is just a bunch of posturing, which we know it is, but it also will definitely have real consequences. And folks are very concerned, and they don't know if they can go on unemployment, for instance. If they do, and do they still have to come to work even though they don't get a paycheck? So just throwing thousands of Texas families just out in the cold and just putting them in this unnecessary situation is just really where our governor is, and it's all politics.
It's incredibly cruel when I mean, that we're coming off of a year and a half of a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now you're thrusting this in front of all of these folks. I mean, this is just very unnecessarily cruel, and I think I guess maybe that's the huge theme of the Texas Republican Party: unnecessary and cruel.
Yep. And we know that, none of this would be happening if Democrats didn't break quorum and kill SB 7, the voter suppression bill. All these other things would have died with that as well. Things that they obviously are telling us now that are major priorities. Meanwhile, the fixing the grid is not part of this priority list that the governor's put out. And he's continued to say, previously he said that everything that needed to be done was done. And then we find out that's actually not the case, because ERCOT is telling us a whole nother week that we have to be careful, not, turn the thermostat up, don't use too much energy, don't wash your clothes during the day. I mean, it sounds like a lot of government telling us what to do, because they aren't doing what they're supposed to do. And, so obviously if the grid isn't fixed, the governor has not made it a priority to do so. And I just find that, pretty interesting. And we know that it's all partisan politics, which is what the Democrats were saying today at sort of a rally that was held right after they gavelled out off the House floor. Members came outside, and I think there were some organizing groups that were out there. I think Texas Civil Rights Project, I think Move Texas, Black votes, Black Voters Matter, and some other organizations I've seen online talking about this event. But the basically the chair of the Democratic caucus is much. Chris Turner said, this is obviously just inner party politics on behalf of Governor Abbott, who's running for reelection. So,
and running for reelection, but also running ostensibly in a theoretical, I think, Republican primary, and he's trying to position himself as, an ultra right wing. This is a party that's been overtaken by a lot of Trump sycophants, and so this is Abbott trying to sort of squeeze his way. And I saw that point being made by a couple of our state representatives, including Gina Hinojosa and Jasmine Crockett, that this is, Abbott trying to finagle his way out of the 1% polling he's currently at in Republican primary politics.
Yeah, and the timing is a little suspect as well, because we know that the only audience member that he has right now, Donald Trump, will actually be in Texas this weekend for CPAC, and along with all the sycophants who talk about, it's just like a laundry list of QAnon supporters and right wing, nuts from all over the country, from Boebert. She's going to be here. Steve Miller is going to be here. It's really just the who's who of MAGA world. And so, with Trump being here, yes, it seems like nobody's running for president. They're all basically running for vice president of Donald Trump, because it's clearly his party. And at this point, it seems like he's running again. And so they all just are, clawing for his endorsement and to be in his good favor. So it seems much more like the people of Texas, the voters of Texas, certainly are being taken on this ride that is a very personal ambition for our governor, and wasting a lot of people's time and putting 2,000 jobs at risk. And it's just obviously not worth it. But to them, it is. And as you mentioned earlier before the call, on Saturday, they're going to start taking testimony on the new version of the voter suppression bill, which was previously SB7. Democrats walked out, killed that bill. So the new bill is HB3. And so when people start talking about HB3, it's essentially the exact same, voter suppression bill that, assuming that there will be a couple of typos left out from the previous draft that they said they couldn't understand how it got there, but for the most part, we're looking at the same bill.
Yeah, I would like to tell folks, because they're also going to, work to reconcile the House bill with the Senate bill. The Senate bill is still not up online, so that is very much par for the course for the Texas Republican Party. So yes, and then there is that very limited window where they can call these hearings. So I had actually heard from folks earlier this week with a lot of our voting rights groups, the target Monday. And so that's actually even pushed up further to Saturday. So for folks who are in the Austin area and who would like to testify, you can reach out to organizations like MOVE and Texas Civil Rights Project, and also work on your brevity. I believe you only have 2 minutes to testify.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing is the Texas Civil Rights Project, which is txcivilrights.org, they have a entire testimony list on their website, so that you can easily go look at the testimony that's been put out there and just kind of help you. So if you are interested in going up there and testifying during the special session, particularly on this bill, they have a lot of information on their website that kind of explains and walks you through, each part of it, because like you said, you only get a couple minutes. So if you want to focus on, just one of these bad restrictions, like the banning of drive-through voting, for instance, or the new restrictions on early voting hours. And so there's just like all kinds of stuff that's in this big package of restrictions. But, it's usually more helpful if people go up there and sort of concentrate on one aspect and really tell a story about how maybe they took advantage of drive-through voting and it was so easy, and they might not have gotten to vote, or their grandmother might not have gotten to vote because they were the ride to, there, and they wanted to be safe because it was a pandemic, and all these other stories that kind of came out. of some of the innovative things we saw in Harris County, we know that a lot of this bill is directly aimed at that, because they see where the growth is in the state of Texas, and that's where they want to make sure that that they get to suppress as much of the vote as possible.
Yeah, I actually talked with someone yesterday. She's with the Texas Association of Retired Americans, and she's been a long time Democrat, long term, grassroots person. So Judy, she's taken out some of her other friends, and they are going to Austin over the weekend. For her, I believe she is focused on exactly as you were talking about the drive-through voting, which we're talking about a lot of the things that are impacting younger Texans, Texans of color. Another group that is severely targeted with these voting restriction bills are the disabled,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's also a constituency that has been organizing and trying to make clear that a lot of these things that the Republicans are trying to pass in this bill are hugely harmful for their community.
I mean, we have a governor in a wheelchair who's making it harder for people with disabilities, and just so people know what we're talking about, the original form of the bill essentially mandated that people with disabilities prove their disability in order to be able to vote by mail, because they're one of the classes of people that they do allow to vote by mail, or absentee as it's called sometimes.
Yeah, Texans usually don't like the government to do stuff like that, but I guess for this bill, Abbott is willing to look the other way.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is it seems like every Republican's not necessarily willing to look away on all this stuff. But it does seem like they have to be out of office in order to all of a sudden see the error of their ways. But we do have a couple of high profile names from the past of Republicans who have stepped up and said that Abbott's vetoing of the funding is unconstitutional. They've sort of joined Democrats and other organizations who are complaining about that veto and how it's going to hurt a lot of people. So former Speaker of the House Joe Straus is one of the names that came up and basically said this is a government overreach by Abbott, and they should essentially null that veto. I think that's the right thing to do. His name has sort of been floated at least behind the scenes a lot as somebody who may potentially challenge Abbott or someone else and run statewide. And I think one of the things that kept coming up was, would he run as a Democrat or would he run as a Republican? And so it's just a time right now, I think, where Republicans sort of, they don't really have the luxury anymore of being pro-Trump or anti-Trump anymore. It's, you are either fully in it 100% and you realize this is Trump's party, or you're a Democrat.
Yeah, I think Strauss he's also spoken out a lot on some of the legislation, like the anti-trans legislation that they're trying to pass, which they failed to do in the earlier session and have now once again bringing up in the special session. I believe he's also criticized Texas for not expanding Medicaid. We're one of 12 states that haven't done that. 1 out of 5 Texans lacks access to health care. Certainly one would think, especially coming out of, what we've experienced through COVID-19, that might change the minds of Republican lawmakers, current Republican lawmakers. It appears that has not, save for one representative, Lyle Larson.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so Strauss, that would be a very interesting decision he would have to make, because he is very much out of step with, the current Republican legislature.
Yeah. I don't think he could be speaker in 2021. Even the current speaker now, Dade Phelan, has gotten a lot of criticism for even the actions of Democrats, and is basically taking the blame for that. And, we know that members, there are a lot of things that go behind the scenes that we don't see. And so, maybe, I guess it's obvious when you see like far right wing folks say they're also mad at Republicans because they have full control of the government and didn't get any of this passed. So like, what are you guys doing? And that has been the complaint for a long time from the far right wing, right? But we're starting to see that now, and it's interesting with Alan West, who is the GOP's state party chair, who has announced that he's running for governor against Greg Abbott while still party chair. But one of his criticisms was that and it sounds like a lot like what our talking point should be. He said it's really hard to see how you can call the session successful when you have so many priorities that didn't get passed. Now, we're totally disagree on these being priorities, but he makes a really good point that these are 11 different items that you think were important that you didn't get passed with full control of the government for 140 days, So whether we agree with the policies or not, that's a huge lack of leadership that we're
Yeah,
seeing.
absolutely. And I guess we'll keep an eye on Alan West. If you missed his announcement, I don't blame you. For some reason, he did that over 4th of July holiday weekend with some clip art that actually made it look like worse for governor. I know that I think you brought that up, and now I kind of can't see that. But basically, I think I could have made a better logo in like first grade with like my Microsoft Word clip art.
I mean, the fact that you even call it clip art is hilarious because that's exactly what it looks like. Yeah, it absolutely, it's supposed to be West with Texas as the E, but the way the flag is sort of blowing in the wind, it actually, when you see it, it looks like worst for governor. I mean, he's not wrong. Again, good point. But I don't think that was his intention. So, it's just interesting to see now with Alan West in the race and with Don Huffines in the race, how sort of the talking points align. Democrats and Republicans both attacking Governor Abbott for essentially what he considers to be priorities. And you mentioned a couple of things that are not on there, like Medicaid expansion, which are actually very popular amongst Texans of all political stripes. Particularly, I think with the pandemic, people realize having access to medical care is good for everybody, because if we all healthy, it makes it much easier for our economy to do
Our
so.
federal funding would come in. So it's actually very popular with many chambers of commerce, pretty much every of the large cities. This is hugely popular. And yes, it is good to have access to healthcare. And it is very unconscionable, I think, that Texas is where we are, the highest number of uninsured in the country.
Mm-hmm. And we're also starting to see that a few spikes in the variants that are happening across the country in terms of increasing positivity rates and hospitalizations from COVID-19. But we said on the last podcast how Democrats are actually at herd immunity, according to the latest poll. 80% of Democrats saying they've received the vaccine. And so I'm wondering at some point, I think we're really going to start to see. I actually did see a map that showed a side-by-side map of states that have reached a certain threshold of vaccination versus the states that Biden won and Trump won. Yeah. It's really close to the same picture. And so these folks, I guess they're doing it to own the libs, but at the end of the day, it's their family that they're spending time with.
Yeah, you're playing Russian roulette with your health, your life. I mean, there's Missouri, I think, is a state that has really been impacted by the Delta variant, particularly in that Ozark region, which is very pro-Trump. And you're seeing like these very heartbreaking stories of people in their 40s, healthy, hospitalized, not vaccinated, essentially telling, the nurse who's looking after them, like, I just didn't think I needed this. And, and I hope that does not happen in Texas, although, there are places where that spike is starting to happen. Actually up in Parker County, I know is one where they're very concerned, especially because we have not expanded Medicaid. Rural hospitals have been, which were already in a really precarious place before COVID-19. They're further exacerbated by that. A lot of these hospitals, have been having to make these very heartbreaking decisions. Like, do we purchase, PPE, or do we, fully pay up payroll? And you would think that if you really did care about rural Texas, you would want these hospitals to remain open. And that's not something, I guess, that Republican lawmakers consider a priority because they don't want to expand Medicaid.
Yeah, I mean it's really awful, and I don't know. I mean, now it's so political. It's like in order to show your Republican chops, you have to really like disparage the vaccine itself and tell everybody how you're not getting the vaccine. I've seen this quite a bit. I hate even saying her name, but I saw Candace Owens trending on Twitter because she was saying nobody in her family is getting the vaccine, and I'm seeing a lot of memes of like weird, like, somebody with like an arm coming out of their head or something, like, oh, got the vaccine, and kind of things like that. So it's really weird. But I don't know if you saw this, to bring it back to Texas, Chip Roy share on social media. So everybody's familiar with the Goliad, or what the flag with that says "Come and take it," and it has the cannon on it. Well, Chip Roy, congressman from Central Texas, shared. It said, "Come inject it," and it was a needle, like a vaccine needle instead of a cannon. So creepy.
It was
And
very creepy. I actually almost thought, like, when I first saw it, I was like, this could almost work for like a plastic surgeon's office, like that does Botox or something like that.
Botox, yes.
It was very strange. I think it was so with Chip Roy, this was in this. So Republicans have been up in arms recently. Joe Biden was giving a press conference about the vaccination rate and how it has kind of stalled a bit, especially in these red states. And so he was basically saying, now we're really trying to, work as hard as we can, going, pretty much community by community, which is why, Dr. Joe Biden was in Dallas last week, and along with Doug Emhoff was also in Houston, trying to promote the vaccine. And so President Biden basically said, we might have to start going door to door. And of course, naturally, our Republican lawmakers like Chip Roy and Dan Crenshaw reacted as if, Texans are just going to be forced into having a needle injected into their arms. When, I mean, I still receive door to door people knocking on my door for things. I really enjoy it when the Girl Scouts come, so I can get my Thin Mints. But like, it was so yes, Chip Roy was very much up in arms again about a vaccine that could save your life.
Yeah, his constituents, right. And the weird thing was, it was so odd. It could have gone either way, right? Like, depending on who is sharing it. Now, it's cringy either way, but like, it wasn't 100% clear that he wasn't promoting the vaccine, because it literally just says come
Yeah,
and
come inject
come
it.
come inject it. It seems like, oh, it's so awful.
I know it is very depressing. And I will just say, after I got the vaccine, um, I experienced no side effects. In fact, I ran a half marathon and trained for it afterwards, and I'm a very unathletic person. So I don't know. Maybe the vaccine gives you some extra athletic ability. I don't know. Maybe
Gives you wings.
yeah. So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah. I know some people who have had, mild symptoms after they got the vaccine, and for me, my arm was just a little bit sore. But I'm also a huge wuss, so it was no problem. It was no big deal. It's obviously totally worth it. Um, and so, to not get sick, because, a lot of the time, what it's a success when we lower the death rate and lower the hospitalization rate and lower the spread. But a lot of times, conservatives, and building up to this sort of anti-vaccination thing we're seeing, we're basically downplaying, or simply saying, okay, if people aren't dying, then that just means it's not dangerous. And I mean, the fact is, the stories that you hear from people who did not die is that they're having incredible long-term effects on their breathing and the way their lungs look under, x-rays and things like that. And it has unknown long-term effects. And it's not just about dying, it's really about your quality of life for the rest of your life, and what it can do. And so, I mean, we know about the one man, the owner of was it Texas Roadhouse, who he essentially killed himself. He literally committed suicide because he had a ringing in his ear that he got. I forgot. There's a term for the illness, But he got that and could not shake it, and it literally drove him insane. And so it's just heartbreaking stuff. And so, yeah, people's just got to be smart. I was thinking about that with the 4th of July weekend. People are going to get together with their families, and these supposedly patriotic folks are going to go out there and spread this disease to the people they claim to love.
And that's the thing. We've heard so many complaints from a lot of folks about like, oh, well, we wanted to get our lives back to normal. We don't want to, social distance or wear a face mask. Which I just have to say, I'm going to continue to wear mine. Just I have not gotten sick in like 2 years, so and my allergies have significantly gone down. So that's
Yeah.
just me though. But they want to get back to where we were in 2019. It's like, well, the best way to do that is to get vaccinated, so that we can reach like a herd immunity. Like I guess we kind of already have if you're a Democrat, but like we're literally just asking you to you have all these complaints about all this stuff. It's like, all right, here's how you end that, but you
They
don't
should,
want to do that
they
either.
should, they should, we should pitch it like the Second Amendment. This is just simply protect yourself. It's another shot that you can take.
People have been pointing this out, like, because a lot of the ideology for Republicans is, to own the libs. And it's like, all right, you want to own a lib? Live till you're 100, 105, and ensure that by getting the vaccine.
Yeah.
Like,
Own them for longer. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
there you go.
Yeah.
But yes, so that is
Yeah.
that
And
is
I just want to touch on your point about how you have not been sick over the last couple of years because you've been wearing the mask. And I can tell you that like my wife's allergies and my allergies and other people I know have said the same thing. And people who would normally get the seasonal flu don't, haven't had it this past year. But online, so this is anecdotally talking to people, but for a while online, when people would look back and see, oh, all of a sudden the flu is gone. And again, the right wing sort of conspiracy narrative was like, oh, that's because they're just saying everything is COVID. But the fact is, yes, because people walked around with masks, because people socially distanced, the flu was literally not impacting, the country the way it had been in the past year. And then you talk to people and they basically say exactly what you said. It's like, yeah, I wore a mask everywhere. I'm socially distanced. And not only did I not get COVID, but I also didn't get the flu or the common cold that I would have normally have gotten in this season.
yeah, and I mean, mask wearing has been very common in Asian countries for
Yeah.
years. I remember I was in Hong Kong, I think at the end of 2019, and I was on a subway, and about 25% of the passengers were wearing a face mask. And I remember at the time thinking like, this is different.
Yeah.
And now I now realizing like I will probably be a person, especially if I'm on public transit, I'm going to be doing that for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we'll also be here for this foreseeable future. We will be covering all the shenanigans at the Capitol. We expect them to, start testimony tomorrow on the first set of bills, and then over the weekend on more. And so they're going to start rolling. It seems like they're underway. And so just if you'll hang tight with us and stick with us, we'll keep you informed at texassignal.com, and of course all the podcasts we do on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, and I think that's it. We're pretty much everywhere. If we're not, let us know. We'll get there. But we certainly appreciate you considering becoming one of our Patreon members by going to texassignal.com, looking at the top right where it says join Patreon, and essentially it's you become a monthly subscriber for a small fee or whatever fee you choose to help make sure that we can continue to do the type of progressive journalism we do here. And we're very grateful to you for that. So thank you again. And until we talk soon, later, y'all.
Bye, guys.